The fluorescent lights in the emergency room were the kind that made everyone look like corpses. I'd been sitting on the gurney for 40 minutes, waiting for someone to come back and finish the paperwork. My right hand was wrapped in gauze, still bleeding through in spots where the stitches hadn't quite taken. The doctor said I'd been lucky. The saw blade had caught my palm instead of my wrist. Lucky. That's what he called it. I called it Tuesday. The accident had happened at the distribution center where I'd worked for the past 11 years. A pallet loader malfunctioned, jerked sideways, and my hand went straight into the safety guard I'd been trying to adjust. The guard wasn't supposed to have a saw blade underneath it. That was a modification someone had made 6 months ago and never documented. I knew who. I just couldn't prove it yet. The pain was manageable. They'd given me something that made my thoughts feel like they were underwater, but the pain itself had settled into a dull throb that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I could handle pain. Pain was predictable. What I couldn't handle was the sound of my son's voice coming down the hallway. "Where is he?" I recognized the tone immediately. It wasn't concern. It was the same tone he used when his cable bill was late or his car needed an oil change. Irritation. Inconvenience. The kind of anger that came from having your evening interrupted. The nurse said something I couldn't hear. Then footsteps. Fast. Deliberate. James walked through the curtain like he owned the place. He was wearing his gym clothes, which meant I'd pulled him away from something important. His wife, Melissa, followed 2 steps behind. She had her phone out, already typing something, probably telling her mother how inconsiderate I was for getting injured on a weeknight. "Dad." James didn't sit down. He stood at the foot of the gurney with his arms crossed. "What happened?" "Accident at work," I said. My tongue felt thick. Hand got caught in the loader. Jesus Christ. He ran his hand through his hair, the same gesture he'd used since he was 12 whenever something annoyed him. "How long are you going to be here?" "They're just finishing up the paperwork. Probably another hour." "An hour?" Melissa looked up from her phone. "We were supposed to meet Brandon and Tiffany for drinks." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just nodded. "Sorry to ruin your plans." James didn't catch the sarcasm. Or if he did, he didn't care. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. "Look, we can't stay." "I'm fine." "Good." He put his phone back in his pocket. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. "Actually, since you're here, we need to talk." The room felt colder. The machines behind me kept beeping their steady rhythm, but everything else went quiet. "About what?" "The house." James glanced at Melissa. She nodded, some kind of silent permission. "You know we've been helping you with the mortgage for the past 2 years." Helping. That was the word he used. As if the $15,000 I'd lent him for his wedding, the $22,000 for his down payment, and the $8,000 for his business startup had just evaporated from the family ledger. As if the fact that I'd co-signed his car loan, his student loans, and his first credit card had never happened. "I know," I said carefully. "Well, we can't keep doing it." James shifted his weight. Uncomfortable, but not guilty. "Melissa's pregnant. We need to save money." I looked at Melissa. She was already 3 months along. I knew because my wife, Catherine, had told me last week. But this was the first time James was mentioning it to me directly. "Congratulations," I said. "Thanks." He didn't smile. "But that means we need you to start paying your own bills, or—" He trailed off. The "or" hung in the air like smoke. "Or what?" "Or you need to sell the house and find something smaller, something you can actually afford." I stared at him. My son. The kid I'd taught to ride a bike. The kid I'd driven to soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 years. The kid who'd called me crying at 2 a.m. when his college girlfriend broke up with him, and I'd driven 3 hours to pick him up and bring him home. "You want me to sell my house?" Our house, James corrected. My name is on the deed, too, remember? You put me on it when you refinanced. I did remember. The bank had required a co-signer because my credit score had tanked after the layoff in 2019. James had been the only one willing to help, and I'd been grateful, stupid and grateful. I remember. So you understand. James checked his phone again. We need you to either start paying the full mortgage yourself or we need to sell. Your choice. But we need an answer by the end of the month. The end of the month was 9 days away. James, I tried to keep my voice steady. I just got injured at work. I'm going to be out for at least 2 weeks, maybe more. That's not my problem. The words hit me harder than the saw blade had. I actually felt my chest tighten. For a second, I thought I was having a heart attack. But no, it was just the feeling of understanding something you'd been trying not to see. Melissa put her hand on James's arm. We should go. Brandon and Tiffany are waiting. James nodded. He looked at me one more time. I'm serious, Dad. End of the month. Figure it out. Then he turned and walked out. Melissa followed. Neither of them looked back. I sat there on the gurney, my hand throbbing, listening to the sound of their footsteps fade down the hallway. The nurse came back in a minute later with discharge papers. She was smiling, professional, efficient. Looks like you're all set, Mr. Brennan. Just need you to sign here. I signed with my left hand. The signature looked like a child's. Do you have someone to drive you home? My wife is coming. Good. You shouldn't be driving with that hand. She glanced at the bandage. The doctor wants to see you again in a week. Make sure everything is healing right. And if you notice any redness, swelling, or if the pain gets worse, come back immediately. I nodded. She left. I sat there alone for another 10 minutes before Catherine arrived. She came through the curtain with her purse clutched tight against her chest, her face pale. She'd been crying. I could tell from the red around her eyes. How bad is it? She asked. It's fine, just some stitches. She sat down next to me on the gurney, careful not to jostle my hand. James called me. Of course he did. What did he say? He said you two had a conversation about the house. Catherine looked at me. Her eyes were dry now, but there was something in them I'd never seen before. Fear. Danny, what's happening? That's when I realized this wasn't anger. It was rehearsal. James hadn't come to the hospital to check on me. He'd come to deliver a message, a threat, and he'd timed it perfectly. I was drugged, injured, and vulnerable. He knew I couldn't fight back, couldn't argue, couldn't do anything except sit there and take it. He'd rehearsed this, maybe with Melissa, maybe with someone else. But this wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the heat of the moment. This was planned. Danny? Catherine's voice pulled me back. Talk to me. They want the house, I said quietly. They want me to pay the full mortgage or sell. But you can't pay the full mortgage, not on your salary, not with the medical bills coming. I know. So what are we supposed to do? I looked down at my bandaged hand. The doctor had said I was lucky. But sitting there in that hospital room, my son's words still echoing in my head, I didn't feel lucky at all. I felt like something had broken, not in my hand, somewhere deeper. I don't know, I said. And for the first time in 27 years of marriage, I couldn't look Catherine in the eye. The drive home was silent. Catherine didn't ask any more questions, and I didn't offer any answers. The pain medication was wearing off, and my hand had started to throb again, a deep ache that radiated up my arm and into my shoulder. Every bump in the road sent a jolt through my body. Our house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. It was a small ranch-style place, 3 bedrooms built in the 70s. We'd bought it in 1998, back when houses were still affordable and the future looked certain. The mortgage had been manageable then. But that was before the refinancing, before the layoff, before I'd put James's name on the deed. Catherine helped me inside. She didn't turn on all the lights, just the lamp in the living room. The house felt empty. It always did these days. Both kids had moved out years ago. James lived 20 minutes away in a newer development. My daughter Rachel lived across town with her husband Blake. "Take these," she said. I swallowed them dry. The water tasted metallic. Catherine sat down next to me. She didn't say anything for a long time, just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the blank TV screen. "How long have you known?" she finally asked. "About what?" "About James, about the way he's been talking to you." I thought about lying, but Catherine had always been able to see through me. "A while," I admitted. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I kept thinking it would get better, that he'd calm down, that he was just stressed about money or work or the baby." I leaned back against the couch. I thought if I just gave him time, he'd remember who I was. And now? Now I know he remembers exactly who I am. He just doesn't care. Catherine was quiet. Then she said, "Rachel called me this afternoon." My stomach tightened. "What did she say?" "She wanted to know if you were okay. James had texted her about the accident." "That's good. At least one of them cares." "She also wanted to know if we'd thought about moving." I turned to look at her. "What?" She said she and Blake have been looking at houses in Arizona. Something about the cost of living being better. She wanted to know if we'd ever considered it. Catherine's voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. She said it might be easier for everyone if we made a fresh start somewhere else. Everyone meaning them. Yes. I closed my eyes. The pain in my hand was nothing compared to the weight settling in my chest. "They're coordinating," I said quietly. "What?" "James and Rachel. They're coordinating their stories. They've talked about this. Maybe for weeks. Maybe months." I opened my eyes and looked at Catherine. "They want us gone." "That's not—" "It is." I cut her off. Not angry. Just certain. Think about it. James shows up at the hospital with an ultimatum. Conveniently, while I'm drugged and can't fight back. Rachel calls you the same day, suggesting we move across the country. They're not worried about us. They're managing us. Catherine stood up and walked to the window. She pulled back the curtain and looked out at the empty street. The streetlight cast her shadow long across the living room floor. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet. We can't sell the house. Where would we go? How would we afford rent somewhere? Your medical bills are going to be enormous. And if you're out of work for 2 weeks..." "I know. And we can't stay here if James forces the sale. He's on the deed. He can make us..." "I know, Catherine." I stood up, my hand pulsing with pain. "I know all of it. I've been running the numbers in my head since he left the hospital. We're trapped." She turned to face me. "So what do we do?" I looked around the living room, at the furniture we'd bought together, the pictures on the walls, the life we'd built over 3 decades, and for the first time since the accident, I felt something other than pain. I felt clarity. "We figure out why they want us gone," I said. "Because the rent isn't about rent." Catherine frowned. "What do you mean?" "They don't need the money. James makes 6 figures. Rachel's husband works in finance. They're not struggling. So why the sudden urgency? Why now? Why corner me in a hospital room when I'm bleeding through bandages?" "I don't know." "Neither do I. But I'm going to find out." I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where we kept important papers. Bills, insurance documents, bank statements. I pulled out the folder labeled House and spread the contents across the kitchen table. Catherine followed me. "What are you looking for?" "Anything that tells me what they're really after." The deed was on top. I scanned it quickly, my eyes catching on the names. Daniel Joseph Brennan. James Michael Brennan. The date of the refinancing, the loan amount, the bank's name. Underneath was the mortgage statement. We were 3 months behind. I'd known that. What I hadn't known was that James had been making the payments directly to the bank, not giving me the money, not even telling me he was doing it, just paying directly and letting the debt accumulate in my name. What? I showed her the statement. He's been paying the bank directly. That means every payment is documented. Every missed month is recorded under my name. If he stops paying and forces a sale, it looks like I'm the one who defaulted. Catherine's face went pale. He's setting you up. Us, I corrected. He's setting us up, and I'm willing to bet Rachel's in on it too. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Hey Dad, heard about your hand. Hope you're okay. Blake and I wanted to talk to you and Mom about something important. Can we come by tomorrow night? I showed Catherine the message. She read it twice. What do you think they want? I think they want to finish what James started. I typed back. Sure. What time? The response came immediately. 7 p.m. See you then. I set the phone down on the table and looked at Catherine. Her hands were shaking. I don't understand, she said quietly. What did we do? How did we raise children who would do this to us? I didn't have an answer. I just pulled her close and held her while she cried into my shoulder. But I didn't let go, because I'd just realized something important. They weren't kicking me out. They were rewriting me, erasing me from the story of my own life. And when they were done, no one would remember that I'd built this house, that I'd paid for their educations, that I'd sacrificed everything to give them the life they now lived. They'd only remember that I couldn't pay my bills. And tomorrow night, they were coming to finish the job. Catherine didn't sleep. I could hear her moving around the house all night, opening drawers, closing cabinets, pacing between rooms. Around 3 a.m, I found her in the home office, surrounded by boxes of old paperwork. What are you doing? I asked. She looked up. Her eyes were red but dry. Looking for proof. Proof of what? Everything. She gestured at the mess around her. Wedding receipts, loan documents, emails, text messages. If they're going to rewrite history, I want the real version documented. I sat down in the desk chair. My hand was still throbbing, but the medication had dulled it to a manageable ache. You think they're going to lie about what we've done for them? I think they already have. Catherine pulled out a folder. Remember when James needed money for his business? The coffee shop that failed after 8 months? Of course. He told everyone we lent him $5,000, but it was 12. I have the bank transfer right here. She showed me the statement. And Rachel's wedding. She told her friends we contributed $3,000. It was 18. I took the statement from her. The numbers were there, clear and undeniable. But seeing them laid out like this, in black and white, made something twist in my chest. They've been minimizing us, I said quietly, making it seem like we barely helped. That way, when they cut us off, it doesn't look as cruel. Exactly. Catherine pulled out more papers. And look at this, the cosign on James's car. He told Melissa you just helped with the paperwork. But you're the primary on the loan. If he defaults, it hits your credit, not his. I spread the documents across the desk. Financial records going back 15 years. Every loan, every gift, every quiet sacrifice that had never been acknowledged. And next to them, the narratives our children had constructed. Smaller numbers, lesser contributions, a rewritten history that painted us as minor characters in their success stories. They've been planning this for years, Catherine said. Not consciously, maybe. But they've been building the framework, minimizing your role, downplaying the help, so when they finally pull the trigger, no one questions it. I thought about James in the hospital, the rehearsed tone, the prepared ultimatum. Tomorrow night is the next step. What do you think they'll ask for? I don't know. But whatever it is, it won't be a request. It'll be a demand wrapped in concern. I looked at the papers spread across the desk. We need to be ready. Catherine started organizing the documents into folders. Should we confront them with this? No. I stood up, my hand pulsing. Not yet. Let them show their hand first. Let's see what story they've prepared. And then I looked at her. Really looked at her. Catherine had always been the steady one, the one who kept things together when I fell apart, the one who believed people were fundamentally good, even when they proved otherwise. But standing there at 3 a.m, surrounded by evidence of our children's betrayal, I saw something different in her eyes. I saw steel. Then we stop playing defense, I said. Rachel and Blake arrived at exactly 7 o'clock the next evening. Rachel was carrying a bottle of wine, the expensive kind that costs $40 and tastes like every other wine. Blake had his tablet tucked under his arm. They both wore smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Hey, Dad." Rachel hugged me carefully, avoiding my bandaged hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I lied. Blake shook my good hand. His grip was firm, practiced, the kind of handshake they teach you in business school. "Sorry to hear about the accident, Dan. Rough break." "Yeah, rough break." Catherine appeared from the kitchen with glasses. She'd dressed nicely for this, I noticed. Not fancy, but put together, like she was preparing for battle. We all sat down in the living room. Rachel poured the wine. Blake opened his tablet. The pleasantries lasted exactly 3 minutes before Rachel set down her glass and looked at me. "So, Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something important." Here it comes, I thought. Blake and I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future, about family, about what's best for everyone. She glanced at her husband. He nodded encouragingly. "And we think it might be time for you and Mom to consider downsizing." "Downsizing," I repeated. "This house is a lot to maintain. The yard, the repairs, the utilities. And with your injury, it's going to be even harder to keep up with everything." Rachel leaned forward, her expression earnest. "We're worried about you." Blake pulled up something on his tablet. "I've been running some numbers. If you sold this place, even in the current market, you'd clear about $80,000 after paying off the mortgage. That's enough for a decent down payment on a condo, something smaller, more manageable." "Something in Arizona," Catherine said quietly. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, surprised. "Well, yes, actually. We've been looking at retirement communities near Phoenix. The cost of living is so much better there. And the weather would be good for your arthritis, Mom." "I don't have arthritis," Catherine said. A beat of silence. Blake jumped in. "What Rachel means is, it would be a fresh start. No stress about mortgage payments, no worrying about upkeep. You could just relax, enjoy your retirement." "I'm 49, I said. "I'm not retired." "But with the injury?" Rachel started. "The injury is temporary. I'll be back to work in 2 weeks." Rachel and Blake exchanged a look. It was quick, but I caught it. The same kind of look James and Melissa had shared in the hospital. Silent communication. A script being adjusted on the fly. "Dad, be realistic." Rachel's voice took on a sharper edge. "You're not getting any younger. This job has already hurt you once. What happens next time? What if it's worse? Then I'll deal with it." "But we'll have to deal with it too." Blake set down his tablet. "Look, Dan, we're not trying to be harsh. But the reality is, if something happens to you, if you can't work, if you can't make the mortgage payments, it affects all of us. James is on the deed. He's liable. And if the house goes into foreclosure, it won't. You don't know that." Rachel's voice rose slightly. "You're 3 months behind on payments right now. James has been covering you, and he can't keep doing that. Not with the baby coming." "So he told you," I said. "Of course he told me. We talk. We're family." Rachel stood up, pacing to the window. "That's what families do. They communicate. They help each other. They don't just bury their heads in the sand and hope problems go away." The implication was clear. I was the one burying my head. I was the one causing problems. Catherine spoke up. "What exactly are you proposing?" Blake turned his tablet around, showing us a spreadsheet. We think the best solution is a clean break. You sell the house within the next 60 days. Use the proceeds to relocate somewhere more affordable. We'll help you find a place, help with the move, whatever you need. But this way, everyone starts fresh. No more debt hanging over anyone's head. 60 days, I said. It's more than fair, Rachel added. Most people get 30 days' notice. I looked at the spreadsheet. Blake had thought of everything. Sale price estimates, closing costs, moving expenses, even a list of retirement communities in Phoenix, complete with pricing and amenities. This wasn't a suggestion thrown together over dinner last night. This was a business plan. When did you make this? I asked Blake. He blinked. What? This spreadsheet. When did you create it? A few days ago. When we started discussing before or after my accident. Blake's jaw tightened. I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question. Rachel stepped in. Dad, stop. Blake is trying to help. Is he? I looked at my daughter. Because it seems like he's been planning this for a while. Which means you've been planning this for a while. Which means this has nothing to do with my accident or James's baby or anything else you've said tonight. That's not fair, Rachel said, but her voice wavered. What's not fair is ambushing your parents in their own home with a 60-day eviction notice disguised as concern. We're not evicting you. Rachel's composure cracked. We're trying to help you. You can't afford this house. You're drowning in debt, and we're the ones who are going to have to clean up the mess when it all falls apart. The mess, I repeated. Is that what I am now? A mess? You're twisting my words. Am I? I stood up, my hand throbbing, because it sounds like you and James have already decided what's best for me. You've run the numbers, made the plans, picked out the retirement home, all without asking me what I want, without even pretending to care what I think. Blake stood too. Dan, you're being unreasonable. I'm being unreasonable? You walk into my house with a goddamn PowerPoint presentation about selling my life, and I'm the unreasonable one? It's just a spreadsheet, Blake said. But his face had gone red. It's just my house, I shot back. The house I've lived in for 27 years, the house I raised my children in, the house I've bled for. But sure, it's just a spreadsheet to you. Rachel's voice went cold. You always do this. Do what? Play the victim. Make everything about you. We're trying to help, and you throw it back in our faces. She grabbed her purse. I should have known you'd react this way. Rachel, Catherine started. No, Mom, I'm done. Rachel looked at me with something close to disgust. James was right. You're never going to change. You're just going to keep dragging everyone down with you until there's nothing left. James said that? Yes, he said you'd guilt trip us, that you'd make us feel bad for trying to do the right thing. She headed for the door. Blake followed. Call us when you're ready to have an adult conversation. The door slammed behind them. Catherine and I stood in the living room, the wine bottle still half full on the coffee table, Blake's tablet abandoned on the chair. They rehearsed that, Catherine said quietly. The whole thing. They knew exactly what you'd say, and they had responses ready. I picked up Blake's tablet. It wasn't locked. I scrolled through the spreadsheet, then into his email. There, from 3 weeks ago, was a message from James. Dad's getting worse with money. Need to coordinate before it's too late. Can you work up numbers for a sale? Blake's response. Already on it. Rachel and I will handle the Arizona angle. You push from your end. I showed Catherine the screen. She read it twice. Then she sat down, her hands shaking. 3 weeks ago, before your accident, before any of this. They've been planning it for at least that long, maybe longer. I scrolled further back, more emails, more coordination, a thread from 2 months ago about managing the situation and protecting our interests. Our interests, not my interests, not the family's interests, theirs. What are we going to do? Catherine asked. I looked at the abandoned tablet, at the spreadsheet that reduced my life to cells and formulas, at the emails that treated me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. And I thought about what Rachel had said. James was right. You're never going to change. She was wrong about that. I was changing right now. We're going to stop asking why they hate me, I said quietly, and start asking what they need me gone for. The pre-trial meeting happened in Malcolm's office on a Wednesday afternoon. Present were Malcolm, me, Catherine, and a paralegal who'd been helping with document organization. The conference table was covered in folders, each one color-coded and labeled: red for work orders, blue for financial documents, green for emails and communications, yellow for witness statements. Let's talk strategy, Malcolm said. He pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. The company is going to argue that the modification was standard procedure, approved by safety, and that your injury was the result of operator error. They'll point to the memo James filed and claim it shows a pattern of unsafe behavior on your part. But we have the work orders showing James approved the modification himself, I said. We do. But they'll argue that James was following company protocol, that the modification was reviewed by the engineering department, that the lack of safety guards was a temporary measure pending final installation. That's bullshit. The modification was made 4 months ago. Nothing temporary lasts that long. I agree. But we need to prove it, which is where our witnesses come in. Malcolm pulled out a yellow folder. We've got 5 workers willing to testify that safety protocols were routinely ignored, that James pressured them to prioritize speed over safety, and that the lack of guards on that pallet loader was part of a broader pattern of corner cutting. Catherine spoke up. What about James himself? Will he testify? He has to. He's the operations manager. The company can't claim the modification was proper without having him explain and defend it. Malcolm smiled. And that's where we get him. Because either he admits he approved an unsafe modification, which makes him liable, or he claims he followed proper safety protocols, which means the company is liable for having unsafe protocols. Either way, someone is responsible. What about the house? I asked. The petition to remove him from the deed? That's separate. We're running that in parallel. But honestly, the workers' comp case is stronger. If we win that, it establishes that James deliberately harmed you. Once that's on the record, the undue influence claim becomes much easier to prove. I looked at the folders. Years of my life, reduced to color-coded evidence. What about Rachel? Catherine asked quietly. Malcolm hesitated. What about her? She's not directly involved in the workers' comp case, but she was part of the plan to force us out of the house. Do we go after her too? That depends on what you want. We can include her in the undue influence petition. We can show the coordination between her and James, the emails, the spreadsheets, but it broadens the fight, and it means she'll be forced to testify against her brother to protect herself. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then, do it. I looked at her. Are you sure? She made her choice. She chose to side with James. She chose to see us as obstacles instead of parents. If we're going to do this, if we're going to fight, then we fight everyone, no exceptions. Malcolm nodded. I'll file the amended petition tomorrow. The first day of trial was a media circus. I hadn't expected that. But apparently, someone had tipped off the local news about the case. Father Sue's son over workplace injury made for a compelling headline. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras. Malcolm had prepared me for this. Don't say anything. Don't engage. Just walk straight to the courthouse and let me handle any questions. We pushed through the crowd, microphones shoved in our faces, questions shouted over each other. Mr. Brennan, is it true your son deliberately injured you? Are you seeking criminal charges? What would you say to your son if he's watching? I kept my eyes forward, Catherine's hand in mine. Malcolm clearing a path. Inside, the courthouse was quieter. We went through security, took the elevator to the third floor, found our courtroom. The company's legal team was already there, a wall of suits and briefcases. James sat at the defense table with his attorney. He didn't look at me. Rachel was in the gallery, sitting alone. When she saw Catherine, her face crumpled, but Catherine walked past without acknowledging her. The judge entered. We all stood. "This is case number 24-CV-8891, Brennan versus Redstone Logistics and James Brennan, regarding denial of workers' compensation benefits. Counsel, are you ready to proceed?" Both sides confirmed. The jury was brought in, 12 people who would decide whether my son had tried to destroy me. Opening statements took an hour. The company's attorney painted me as a careless worker, someone who'd ignored safety protocols and paid the price. He showed pictures of my injury, described the accident in clinical detail, and presented the memo James had filed as evidence of my recklessness. Malcolm countered with the work orders. He explained how James, as operations manager, had approved a modification that removed safety features, how he'd then blamed the resulting injury on operator error, how the timeline of the memo, created after the modification was approved but before the accident happened, suggested premeditation. "This isn't a case about workplace negligence," Malcolm told the jury. "This is a case about a son who saw his father as an obstacle and used his position of authority to remove that obstacle. The injury wasn't an accident, it was inevitable, and James Brennan knew it." The first witness was the doctor who'd treated me in the emergency room. He described the injury, the surgery required to repair the damage, the long-term effects I'd likely face, reduced grip strength, chronic pain, potential arthritis. The second witness was Dennis Mora. He testified about the modification, about James ordering him to skip the safety guards, about being told it was temporary. "Did you believe it was temporary?" Malcolm asked. "At first, yes, but after 4 months with no follow-up, I realized it wasn't. They just wanted the speed increase. They didn't care about the risk." "Did you express concerns about the safety risk?" "Yes. To James directly." "What did he say?" "He said we'd deal with it if something happened, that the risk was acceptable compared to the productivity gains." The company's attorney objected. "Hearsay." The judge allowed it as a statement against interest. The third witness was another floor worker. He testified about the culture of corner cutting, about being pressured to skip safety checks, about seeing the pallet loader without guards and being told not to worry about it. "Did anyone get hurt before Mr. Brennan's accident?" Malcolm asked. "Yeah, 2 guys, minor injuries. But they didn't report them because they were afraid of retaliation." "What kind of retaliation?" "Getting fired, or worse, getting blamed for the injury and having it affect their workers' comp claims." By the end of the first day, the company's narrative was crumbling. The jury had heard from multiple witnesses that safety wasn't a priority, that James had created a dangerous environment, that the injury was predictable. But James hadn't testified yet. The second day started with the company's witnesses, safety inspectors who claimed the modification met all requirements, engineering reports that justified the lack of guards, a parade of corporate representatives who swore that Redstone Logistics took safety seriously. Malcolm tore them apart on cross-examination. If safety is such a priority, why were workers afraid to report injuries? If the modification met all requirements, why did 2 people get hurt before my client? If the engineering report justified removing the guards, why was there no documentation of that justification in the work order? None of them had good answers. Then, after lunch, James took the stand. He was sworn in, sat down, avoided looking at me. The company's attorney started with softballs, background, education, work history, building him up as a competent, responsible manager. Then they moved to the modification. "Mr. Brennan, can you explain why you approved removing the safety guards from the pallet loader?" James shifted in his seat. "It was a temporary measure." The guards were interfering with the loading mechanism. We needed to adjust them, but we didn't want to shut down operations while we did the redesign. So I approved a temporary removal with the understanding that new guards would be installed within 2 weeks. And were they installed? No. Why not? The engineering department said they needed more time to design the new guards. There were spec issues, so the temporary removal became longer than intended. But you believed it was safe? Yes, the risk was minimal, and I monitored the situation closely. Malcolm's turn. He stood up, walked to the witness stand, and just stared at James for a long moment. Mr. Brennan, you testified that you monitored the situation closely. Is that correct? Yes. How often did you personally inspect the pallet loader? James hesitated. I don't recall the exact frequency. Once a week? Once a month? Probably once a month. Probably. Malcolm pulled out a document. According to your own shift logs, you were on the warehouse floor, where the pallet loader operated, at least 3 times a week. Is that correct? Yes. So you saw the pallet loader without safety guards 3 times a week for 4 months, correct? I suppose. And in all that time, you never ordered the guards to be reinstalled. You never followed up with engineering. You never documented any concerns. Is that correct? James's jaw tightened. The engineering department was handling it. But you're the operations manager. You're responsible for safety on the floor, correct? Yes. So, if engineering wasn't moving fast enough, whose responsibility was it to escalate the issue? Mine. And did you? No. Malcolm pulled out another document. This is the memo you filed 1 week before the accident. It documents multiple safety violations by your father. Correct? Yes. Did you personally observe these violations? Yes. When? James faltered. I don't remember the exact dates. You don't remember, but you remembered enough to write a detailed memo listing specific incidents. Incidents that, according to shift logs, you couldn't have possibly witnessed because you weren't on the floor when they allegedly occurred. The courtroom went quiet. Mr. Brennan, Malcolm continued, isn't it true that you created this memo not because you observed safety violations, but because you needed a paper trail to protect yourself when the inevitable accident happened? No. No? Then explain how you documented violations that occurred on days when you were in meetings, off-site, or on vacation. James looked at his attorney. No help there. I must have gotten the dates wrong, he said weakly. You got every single date wrong. Every incident you listed occurred when you were not on the warehouse floor, which means either your memo is entirely fabricated or you have the worst memory of any operations manager in history. Which is it? I don't know. You don't know if you fabricated a safety report about your own father? Objection! The company's attorney stood up, badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, Mr. Reeves. Malcolm switched tactics. Mr. Brennan, you're aware that your father's name is on the deed to a house you've been trying to sell, correct? Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, this goes to motive. The judge nodded. I'll allow it. James looked cornered. Yes, I'm on the deed too. And you want your father to sell that house, correct? It's complicated. Is it? You and your sister presented your parents with a plan to sell their home and move to Arizona. Your brother-in-law created a detailed spreadsheet outlining the financial benefits. All of this happened before your father's injury, correct? Yes. So you wanted him out of the house, and then, conveniently, he got injured at work. In a workplace you controlled, on equipment you'd made unsafe, injured badly enough that he couldn't work, couldn't make mortgage payments, couldn't fight back when you demanded he sell. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Walk me through the timeline. You approve an unsafe modification in March. You create a false safety memo in June. Your brother-in-law creates a spreadsheet about selling your father's house in June. Your father gets injured in July. You confront him in the hospital about selling in July. Tell me, Mr. Brennan, which part of that timeline is coincidence? James didn't answer. You used your position as operations manager to create the circumstances that would force your father out of his own home. You deliberately endangered him. And when he got hurt, exactly as you knew he would, you blamed him for it. Isn't that the truth? No. No? Then explain the emails. Explain the coordination with your sister. Explain how a spreadsheet about selling your father's house existed before he had any reason to sell. I can't. You can't, or you won't. Malcolm walked back to our table. No further questions. The damage was done. James had been caught in multiple lies. His story about the temporary modification didn't hold up. His safety memo was demonstrably false. And the coordination with Rachel, combined with the suspicious timing, painted a clear picture of intent. When we broke for the day, Malcolm was confident. The jury saw him squirm. They saw him lie. This is over. But I wasn't thinking about the jury. I was thinking about James, walking out of the courtroom with his head down, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear. He'd tried to destroy me, and now I'd just destroyed him. In public, on the record, in a way that couldn't be erased or rewritten. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt empty.